Hey everybody, today we're going to be installing these Old Man Emu Dakar leaf springs in the 2005 Nissan Xterra behind me. The current suspension is stock, at least the leaf springs are. The shocks have been changed out, but the leaf springs are stock, so they're tired, they're sagging, they need to be replaced. So did a bunch of research, looked around, and ultimately decided to go with full replacement leaf springs, and so these are them. We have bushing kit. We have longer Ubolts, and we also have the sway bar relocation kit. It's just a little spacer to move it out of the way from the shocks, just because these are a little bit taller than the stock springs. So we're gonna go ahead and dive in. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to drop the spare tire. So we're using the default kit that the car comes with for changing a tire. So this thing goes in here, and it will catch, and then you use the tire iron here to slowly lower the tire. So you can see it coming down there. So you just turn this until it goes hits the ground. You release the chain, and then we'll pull the tire out of the way, and we'll have some more room to work. Okay, so with the tire out of the way, we're going to jack up the car itself with the floor jack here. Contact point will be the rear differential, so we're going to... Okay, so we've lowered it down onto the frame. We double checked the contact. It looks good. And so now what we need to do is we need to put jack stands under the axle, because otherwise, even though we've jacked up the car, when we lower the floor jack, the wheels will go all the way back down to the ground because the springs are just basically flexing. So we want to be able to pull the wheels off, so we need to keep the axle raised so that we can pull the wheels off. Now we're going to take the wheels off. Okay, so now that we have the truck in the air and it's fully supported, first thing we need to do is loosen the lower bolts on the shock to free that, and we've got to do that on both sides. So it's a nut and a bolt, so we'll have to have something to hold this, and then we'll spin that. And I have shot this down with liquid wrench, so it should come off relatively easy, I'm hoping. And so we'll do that now. Okay, so this shock is free. Now we just got to do it again. Okay, so both shocks are disconnected from the bottom bolts, so they're free. And the next step is to remove the U-bolts from both sides. So we're going to work on the left side here. The U-bolts mount to the axle and the leaf spring. They tie it together. That's what their job is. And then underneath is this plate. And then under the plate, you can see, are 4 bolts. And poking through in the nuts that hold them on. So what we have to do is take those nuts off, and that will free the spring from the axle. Finally, we've got the U-bolts completely off. The axle is completely separated from the springs now on both sides. So what's left now is to pull the springs. There are bolts in the back and bolts in the front, and we're going to pull those. On the back we have actually a shackle, and it's a little tricky, so I'm going to show you kind of what I came up with. What basically is happening is the shackle wants to move because that's its job. So as I'm trying to loosen the nut, the shackle's moving around. So actually there are two bolts. One is what holds the leaf spring to the shackle, and then the other bolt is connecting the frame to the shackle, and so those two actually move around. So I actually need to hold one bolt and then the other at the same time and sort of apply opposing force. So I'm going to show that, but it's a little, gave me a little bit of trouble at first, and it's also tight quarters, so that makes it even more exciting. So here we go. Okay, so you can see right here, this bolt right here is holding the leaf spring to the bottom part of the shackle, and then up higher, which you can't see, is another bolt that holds it to the shackle, holds the frame to the shackle. So I'm going to get a breaker bar, and by the way, definitely want to spray all this stuff down with PB Blaster or liquid wrench or something to just get the threads well lubed up so that you can break this stuff, because in my case some of this stuff hasn't been disconnected for over 10 years, so it can be stubborn. So here we go. The first one is I've got the breaker bar, and this is a 17 millimeter bolt. So I've got the breaker bar here, and then I've got another, this is a 3/8, another 17 millimeter, and I'm going to put that on the higher bolt, or nut, yes, technically. And then there we go. Okay, so now I have a cheater bar so that I can get some more leverage. Otherwise the breaker bar really is too overpowered. So basically, here we go. There we go, and it gave. Okay, so once it gives, it's not too bad, and you can just ratchet it off from there. So I'm just going to loosen it. I don't think I'm going to pull it off quite yet because I want to go break the other side while it's still. As you can see, the springs are out. I ran out of daylight yesterday, so I wasn't able to show that part. But it's pretty straightforward. Basically, just pull the bolts on the front and the back, and they drop right out. Now that the springs are off the vehicle, I wanted to show them to you side by side. I think you'll notice right away there's a pretty significant difference between the two. The stock springs here are 1.5 inches thick, and the OME Dakar springs are 2¼ inches thick. So 3/4 of an inch difference in thickness. And weight is also significantly different. The stock springs weigh in at about 31 pounds, and the OME springs weigh in at about 55 pounds. So a 24-pound difference between the two. So I expect that that's going to make them perform quite a bit better. So I'm really looking forward to getting these things on the vehicle. We're working on removing the shackles. And right now we're working on the right side of the vehicle because in order to remove the shackle bolt, we actually have to loosen the exhaust and move it out of the way to get a little bit of play. So we're going to take the 12 millimeter socket here and just loosen these 3 bolts on the bracket that holds up the exhaust pipe. We need to remove the shackle because we're going to change out the bushings, and we also need to clean it up so that we can lube it properly. So basically we're going to take the 17mm ratchet, pull off the bracket, and then slowly slide out the bushing from the mount on the frame. So there's one 17mm bolt, and one more. And then you just loosen the shackle out of the bushing, and hopefully we have enough play with the tailpipe to get it to come out. I'm having to actually drop the tailpipe down to get the room. There we go. So there's still some rubber bushings in there. So pull those out because we're going to replace those with the OME polyurethane bushings. This is the shackle. It's off the vehicle. The leaf spring actually goes here, and this end mounts to the frame. But what we're going to do right now is we're just going to clean it up. There's actually a little bit of pitting here, not too much, but mostly there's just a lot of residue of residual rubber from the old bushings. So in order to make sure that we've got a nice slick surface for the new bushings, we want to just kind of clean these up a little bit. And it's not going to be too extensive, but I am going to use a little bit of WD-40 just to kind of as a solvent, and then I'm going to use a gasket scraper just to kind of get off some of this stubborn rubber deposits. And you can see there's actually quite a bit of rubber and other dirt here at the flange. So I'm just trying to get a nice clean surface. We're going to grease this all, of course, but just so that we start off in a good position, and we're going to clean it up. We're at a point where we're going to have to install the bushings into the springs. So let's talk about the bushings. This is the Old Man EMU kit, and it is paired for the springs and the Xterra. So this is the kit that you use if you want to use these springs and the Xterra. These bushings are actually made out of polyurethane, and there's a couple different kinds of bushing material that you'll find out there. One is rubber, the other is polyurethane. There's a lot of debate about which one's better. It doesn't seem like there's a clear winner necessarily. I think it more depends on your application. And so in this case, these are polyurethane, so that's what we're going to use. The main differences though are the rubber material is softer, and so it contributes to a smoother ride. Less road noise, less vibration. But it does wear out. That's kind of the downside of it. The polyurethane bushings is a harder material, so it doesn't wear out, but it also has a little bit harder of a ride. It's not as smooth as the rubber. And because it's a harder material, it also is susceptible to squeaking, so you have to lubricate it. That's a really important distinction because you don't have to lubricate rubber. So if you don't lubricate it, you're going to get some squeaking most likely. So we definitely have to lubricate it. So I did a bunch of research on what type of lubrication to use, and I didn't really get a definitive answer as to what was best. There's a lot of ideas out there, there's a lot of people talking about it. One thing that was very clear was don't use a petroleum-based grease because it can soften the bushing and it can lead to the breakdown of the material, so you want to avoid that. But as far as what to use, there's a couple different options. Silicone-based grease, moly-based grease, and lithium-based grease are all okay to use. And which one's better, I don't really know. Didn't seem like there was a clear answer to that. A lot of different opinions. So I did a bunch of research to see what I could use, and what I came up with was a company called Energy Suspension, and they make a grease that is just specifically designed for the polyurethane bushing and a suspension application. So that seems like that's exactly what I need. So I went ahead and bought some, and this is what it looks like. You can probably just barely see it. It's a white container and white grease. I don't really know what it's made of because the website didn't say specifically. I did read somebody claiming that it was silicone based, which I would believe because it does look kind of silicone-y to me. But the website did talk about the advantages of this particular grease, and basically what they said was that it's waterproof, so that's really good because it's going to be up underneath the car and it's going to be getting water splashed on it, and you really don't want it to wash off. You want it to stay put, so it should, because it's waterproof. It's also chemical resistant, so road oil and salt and other things that it could come in contact with, it will resist, so that's also good. And then it's heat resistant, so it's not going to melt away. You're not going to turn into a liquid and just run out and leave you not lubricated. So we'll try it, we'll see how it works, but so far it looks like it's exactly what we need. You can see that there are 3 pairs, and they go from one from each side and they meet in the middle. This pair here is going to go on the front end of the spring, and this sleeve is going to go through here, and then there's going to be a bolt that goes down here, and that's what's going to attach it to the frame. These 2 here are going to go on the rear of the spring, and they're going to go on the bottom end of the shackle. And then these go on the top end of the shackle. And as far as greasing is concerned, we're going to grease all the way around the outside here. We're going to grease the inside, and we're also going to grease the face. So every actual surface is going to get some of the grease. And then of course we'll also grease inside there too. Alright, so now we're at the rear, and we're going to put in the bushings for the upper part of the shackle, and we're going to put the shackle in preparation for putting the spring in. So the first thing is I'm going to actually put a bunch of lubricant here inside of the bracket. And just kind of work it in. And then I'm going to actually work the lube onto the bushing itself, trying to get it into all these grooves just like I did on all the other ones. Do the back end here, and inside. Okay, we'll put that in. Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to put some of the lube on the shackle here. There should be plenty on the bushing itself, but just to make sure we got good contact, work it in there. On this one, it's particularly important to get, around here And also, since we are going to put this part in, I want to make sure there's a good amount also on the face. Okay. So that's going to poke right into there and just press right in. Okay. Great. All the bushings have been lubed and put in place, and both shackles have been installed in the rear. So all that's left is to put the spring on and reconnect everything. The other side's done, so let's do this one. Okay, first thing we're going to do here is apply some of the lube here on the lower shackle. We're also going to make sure to get on this edge part, because the face of the bushing is going to go up against that. So we want to make sure that that's well lubed. And that looks good. And then in order for the spring to actually attach, we need to walk this shackle back a little bit to make room for it to come in and slide in. And you can just move these things together out there a little bit at a time, and then push it through and push it back in. There we go. Good contact. Now we're going to put the front of the spring into the frame. So we want to make sure to put some lube here on the outside, on the inside, and we'll put some on the bolt. Make sure that's got some good stuff on it. Okay. So now it's just a matter of lifting the spring into position and putting the bolt in the hole. Both springs are in now, so the next step is to attach the leaf pad to the springs. It takes a little bit of maneuvering of the axle to get it all to work right, but if you are patient and you use the jack right, you can do it. Boy, am I glad that's over. Finally got the spring connected to the axle. So, hallelujah. Took a lot of finesse and a lot of patience, but it's over. Now it's time to move on. Well, when I started this project, I wasn't actually intending to upgrade the shocks, just the leaf springs. But as I got under here and I got a closer look, I could see that the shocks were actually due for a replacement as well. So, right now there's the Bilstein 5100s on the vehicle right now, but I decided to try the OME shocks just to make it a nice unit and see how those are. So I'm going to go ahead and take the old shocks off right now, and then we'll put the new ones on. Okay, now that the shock is removed, we're going to put the new one in. First thing you got to do is pull the retainer clip. This is going to cause the shock to actually start expanding, but we have the vehicle dropped pretty low, so we shouldn't actually have any trouble. Okay, these are just finger tight for now, but we'll torque them down later. One thing I wanted to show you, and I'm not sure how easily you can see it on here, but right here is the sway bar, and right here is the shock, and you can see that there's actually contact here, and this is part of what the sway bar relocation kit is designed to deal with. So that's actually what I'm going to do next. I'm going to put in the sway bar relocation kit. This is the sway bar, and we're going to remove the sway bar so that we can put in a spacer kit. Okay, Okay, this is the spacer, and what it does is it moves the sway bar up and then out a little bit. So we're going to put this in front of where the bracket is, and then we're going to attach the bracket to this. We need to reattach the tailpipe bracket since we had to loosen it in order to get the leaf spring out. So here we are reattaching it. Okay, this is the home stretch. We've connected everything. Everything looks good. All we have to do is lower the vehicle and tighten everything down to factory spec.